The Senate, by a vote of 55 to 45, rejects Judge Haynesworth's nomination to the Supreme Court. President Nixon says he regrets that action and believes the nation regrets it too. Senator Mansfield calls for an investigation into those charges of American atrocities in Song Mi. And the Apollo 12 astronauts leave lunar orbit and head for home. Howard?
Reports tonight from Stephen Gear on how Judge Haynesworth received the word of his defeat, Bill Downs on the widened Army investigation into the incident at Song Mi, Roger Peterson on the Vice President's two newest targets, Dick Shoemaker on the problems of science fiction filmmakers, that is, trying hard to keep pace with fact, John Davenport on a West Coast fish-in, and tonight's commentary on Vice President Agnew and network television news. President Nixon, triumphant with the ABM and the draft bill, suffered his first major defeat in Congress today when Judge Haynesworth was rejected by the Senate 55 to 45. ABC Capitol Hill correspondent Bob Clark reports.
The Haynesworth battle had raged for 3 months in the Senate and become a sort of loyalty test for Republicans when the president decided to fight it out to the bitter end. The showdown turned out all 100 senators in a rare spectacle of congressional drama. Vice President Agnew presided in his constitutional role as president of the Senate, but didn't get to cast the tie-breaking vote some had expected. Defeat was a bitter moment for Haynesworth's supporters.
The failure to confirm Judge Haynesworth is a disappointment to people all over this country who believe in upholding the Constitution. But I am firmly of the belief that the President will appoint another great constitutional lawyer who will give balance to the court.
Republicans provided the margin of defeat. 17 Republicans voted against Haynesworth, including the minority leader, Hugh Scott. So did the assistant Republican leader, Bob Griffin, who first warned the president weeks ago that he was risking defeat unless he withdrew the nomination.
When no decision was made today on matters of ethics or honesty, the only question that was before the Senate today was whether or not this nominee should be promoted to the Supreme Court of the United States, and the majority of the senators said no.
Well, there has been a lot of Republican bloodletting in this fight. Don't you think, as you look back, that it would have been wiser if your original suggestion had been carried out, that the nomination be withdrawn?
Yes.
The intensive pressure from all sides, from the White House and from the labor unions who led the fight against Haynesworth, turned today's vote into sort of a test of character for many senators. In the end, a surprising number on both sides, for and against, defied all the political pressure and voted the way they thought was right. Bob Clark, ABC News, Capitol Hill.
Only one presidential nominee to the High Court has been rejected by the Senate in this century. Today's vote represents a return to the more stringent practice of last century when a total of 18 presidential appointments to the court were turned down by Congress. For a report on White House reaction, here's ABC's Tom Jarrell.
Even the Senate rejection of Judge Haynesworth still didn't shake the president's confidence in him. After the Senate vote was in, the president personally telephoned the judge, urged him to remain on the federal bench, and is confident he will. In a written statement, President Nixon says he regrets the Senate action, and he believes a majority of the people in the nation regret the action. The president reaffirms his trust in Judge Haynesworth and deplores the attacks made against him. Besides a defeat for the president, the Senate vote also was a setback for several of the president's closest aides, charged with screening nominations and getting them through the Senate. The president plans to use the same criteria again in making his next nomination, which will go before the Senate early next year. By that yardstick, we can expect another conservative, probably from the South. The president made the fight for a man he has never seen or met. For the story from Judge Haynesworth's hometown, here's ABC correspondent Stephen Gear in Greenville, South Carolina.
When Judge Haynesworth left his substantial home in one of Greenville's finest residential districts this morning, he knew his future was hanging in the balance, and he went to await the outcome of the Senate vote in his second-floor office. When he permitted photographers to come in for a brief picture session this morning, he was calm and smiling. Because of a tendency to stutter, he declines interviews. When the vote came, he heard the result on a radio in his office. An hour and 20 minutes later, with the judge in seclusion, his staff distributed a 200-word statement. It began, "The ordeal of the last 2 months is ending." After words of gratitude to the President and those who supported him, the judge acknowledged that the Senate rejection has so impaired his usefulness that he must now consider whether to leave the Court of Appeals and return to private life. The statement ends, "I will reach a conclusion as to my future course in approximately 2 weeks." Whatever he decides, the judge will remain in Greenville, which, unlike Washington, contains few Haynsworth opponents. Stephen Gear, ABC News, Greenville, South Carolina.
Senator Ernest Hollings of South Carolina, the Democrat who first proposed Haynsworth to the president, blamed the administration for the defeat. The cause was lost, he said, when Republican leaders, Senators Hugh Scott and Robert Griffin, quote, scattered like a covey of quails to vote against their own president's nominee. We'll be back with more news in a moment.
Thank you. Okay, sweetie, let's see you stir and stroke.
Why use Lucite? I skipped the stirring.
Yeah? Then paint some and drip a little. I want to see how you wipe up the drips.
But I use Lucite. It doesn't make a drippy mess. I skip wiping.
Oh, yeah? Well, let's see you clean up.
But I use Lucite. All I need is soap and water. I skipped that mess. Any more questions?
Just one. Will you marry me?
We're going to drive home a point about new anti-leak Zerex antifreeze. It stops most common radiator leaks, just like that. We guarantee it will stop and prevent leaks in your car radiator for a full year. Or just write DuPont and get your money back. Only Zerex antifreeze is guaranteed not to run out on you.
It now appears almost certain there will be a congressional investigation of the alleged massacre of more than 500 Vietnamese civilians by American troops last year. Today, the majority leader of the Senate, Mike Mansfield, said he thinks the Armed Services Committee ought to find out what happened and get to the bottom of it. 2 American soldiers already face charges in connection with the case, and the Pentagon announced today that others are being questioned. Here is a report from ABC's Bill Downs in Washington.
The General Counsel of the Army, Robert Jordan, is the first high defense official to express concern that U.S. troops in Vietnam might have committed genocide. Jordan denied any Army cover-up of the Son My incident. In fact, at a Pentagon briefing, he revealed the Army is expanding its investigation.
Well, there's a very large investigation underway, and a number of Army Criminal Investigation Division personnel are assigned to it. We've thus far interviewed about 75 people, and we're interviewing more people every day. At the present time, there are approximately 9 people whose names have come up in the course of the investigation and whose relationship to alleged incidents will be further explored by the investigators. In addition, there are a number of people, a somewhat larger number, and I think it's approximately 15, whose names have come up who are no longer in the Army. The 9 are still in military service. The others are people who've been released from active duty. All of these aspects are being explored, and because of the number of witnesses involved, it'll take a while.
Jordan called the international reaction to the Son My affair a very grave matter. He said the Army's rules of combat reflect the humanitarian principles established in the Nuremberg trials. Bill Downs, ABC News, Washington.
The incident has caused a major uproar around the world, particularly in Britain. Prime Minister Wilson told the House of Commons today that if the reports proved to be only 1/4 true, they would still be grave atrocities. Izvestia, the Soviet paper, published a half-page spread on the reported massacre under a one-word headline, barbarism. In Vietnam, it was disclosed today that last week, U.S. Marine helicopter crews accidentally strafed other Marines near Da Nang. 11 were wounded. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which decided not to hold public hearings on the war in Vietnam after President Nixon's recent speech, now has reversed itself. By a vote of 7-2, the committee decided today to hold new hearings in public. The committee chairman, Senator Fulbright, said no date has been set for the start of the hearings. We'll have more news in a moment.
Look, Fritz, Mama puts the pies out to cool.
Wrong house. Mama puts the pies out for us.
And off we go.
What? Captain Inspector Hell? Good.
But my stomach don't feel so good.
Yeah, too much to quick.
There those smarties are. Ready, Inspector?
Ready, Captain.
Stay, let go.
Let go nothing.
And now you get the medicine what you decide.
Wait, here's what the darlings need. Pepto-Bismol. The good-tasting medicine with coating action. The same coating action that coats inside the bottle works way down in the tummy to soothe tummy trouble.
Well, we didn't got the spanking.
But we did got the fight.
Smart, Alex? Now you get some of our medicine.
There's all kinds of medicine for the kids. But when it comes to tummy trouble, give out with the good-tasting one. Pink Pepto-Bismol.
Vice President Agnew's speech last night criticizing the news media touched off a short debate this afternoon on the Senate floor. Thomas Dodd of Connecticut called for a first-class inquiry into the power of the press. Democratic leader Mansfield responded by suggesting that it is now time for Agnew to follow the president's inaugural day advice and lower his voice. In his comments last night, the vice president charged there's a growing monopolization of the vehicles of public information, and he singled out the Washington Post and the New York Times.
But a single company in the nation's capital holds control of the largest newspaper in Washington, D.C., and one of the 4 major television stations, and an all-news radio station, and one of the 3 major national news magazines, all grinding out the same editorial line. And this is not a subject that you have seen debated on the editorial pages of the Washington Post or the New York Times. The day when the network commentators and even the gentlemen of the New York Times enjoyed a form of diplomatic immunity from comment and criticism of what they said is over. Yes, gentlemen, that day is past. I don't seek to intimidate the press or the networks or anyone else from speaking out. But the time for blind acceptance of their opinions is past, and the time for naive belief in their neutrality is gone.
The vice president said last night that when criticism becomes unjust, editors will be invited down from their ivory towers to enjoy the rough and tumble of public debate. For a look now inside those ivory towers at the Washington Post and the New York Times, here is ABC's Roger Peterson.
Even though it's published in New York, the New York Times is considered a national newspaper. Its daily circulation of 1,012,000 places it 3rd in the country. The Times says, contrary to what the vice president may think, the Times has never sought immunity from criticism. Perhaps next in influence is the Washington Post, whose circulation of nearly 500,000 is limited to the greater Washington region and scattered sections of the East Coast. But if the Post doesn't have the national audience of the Times, like the Times, it reaches the leaders in Washington every day. The Post owns WTOP radio and television in Washington, both generally top-rated in their area, the 8th largest market in the country. Both stations were among the first to broadcast daily editorials, which station officials say demonstrate their independence from the Post. Most recently, when the Post endorsed the Hainsworth nomination, WTOP opposed the judge. Newsweek magazine, also owned by the Washington Post Company, has a domestic circulation of 2.5 million a week. A spokesman says the management comment that the Post and Newsweek compete vigorously is understatement. The truth is, he said, we fight like hell. Roger Peterson, ABC News, reporting.
Just after the president's Vietnam speech, a woman from Houston complained to the Federal Communications Commission that, quote, the newsmen were very one-sided in their analysis of the speech. Today, the FCC responded without a dissenting vote that the comments were protected by the First Amendment to the Constitution and no federal action was warranted. We'll have more news in a moment.
What are you doing 9:15 Saturday morning? What about 11 o'clock Saturday morning? What are you doing at 2:45 Saturday afternoon? What about 4:15? you doing at 12:30 Sunday? The weekend. Special places to go, special things to do. Visiting by long distance is one of them. And phone rates are low all weekend, as little as $1 plus tax coast to coast. Call early this weekend, before the Sunday evening rush hours. What are you doing this weekend?
We'd like to show you a unique communicating device. One that brings you more than meets the ear. Kellogg's Rice Krispies. The world's only talking cereal. So crisp in milk it says snap, crackle, pop.
Snap, crackle, pop.
The important nutrition of iron, niacin, and thiamine. Kellogg's Rice Krispies. The communicating cereal that brings you more than meets the ear. What's more, you needn't answer. Just nod if it's getting through.
Look at him. He's old enough to be your father. How do you know? He's my father.
And he knows how to stay on the young side. Sensible exercise and sensible eating, starting with breakfast. Kellogg's Product 19, a delicious blend of 4 grains with 100% of the minimum daily adult requirements for vitamins and iron. Want to get back on the young side? Start with Kellogg's Product 19.
If that's your father, I'd sure like to meet your brother.
Like many other Americans who've had a hard but productive day on the job, the Apollo 12 astronauts are happily on their way home tonight. Late this afternoon, they blasted themselves out of lunar orbit, and a short time later gave us another television show from space. ABC science editor Jules Bergman reports.
The moon, minutes after the Apollo 12 crew fired up their onboard engine and headed home. They'd spent the day filming future landing sites. In this live color transmission, minutes after heading home, they're 3,000 miles high over the moon. Then they pointed the camera back in the cabin, and Pete Conrad told us about the pinpoint landing he and Al Bean had made.
One of the big thrills, of course, for Al and I was to sit down next to the surveyor, especially when we stepped outside and looked around back to the spacecraft. Yeah, I was thrilled. Saw it sitting right there on the other side of the crater. I also gave myself quite a thrill. I think you'll appreciate it when you see the pictures and you see how close we landed to the crater. Which I understand we've changed the schedule around there quite a bit since we left last Friday. And we're very sorry about that, but that can't be helped either. No problem.
Apollo 12's crew, in perfect shape, headed toward a Pacific splashdown late Monday afternoon. This is Jules Bergman, ABC News, reporting.
Today's fact, yesterday's science fiction. Hollywood is having a hard time keeping ahead of the Joneses, the Von Brauns, the Conrads, and so forth, with the present threatening to catch up with the future. But Hollywood keeps trying. Last night, one film company took over the entire San Francisco airport for the filming of a science fiction movie. ABC's Dick Shoemaker was on the set to watch Gregory Peck perform.
What are your parameters, Courtney?
EKG, right and ready.
Hollywood is trying hard to stay ahead of everybody in the race for outer space. This is a scene from a new CinemaScope spectacular starring Gregory Peck. In the picture, the United States has orbited a manned space laboratory, a bus stop for future missions to other planets. Inside the lab, everything looks real, and it should be, since NASA specifications were used to build a set. Science fiction is science fact in Hollywood, as the astronauts go through the motions of trying to live 7 months inside a capsule. The title of the film is Maroon, and that gives you a hint of what's in store for these acting astronauts. Another film, THX 1138, a subterranean society of the future. There are no names here, just numbers. Sex is a crime and drugs are mandatory. 2 men, THX and SEN, try to escape their sterile existence. In this film, the future is no place for a man who wants to be an individual. Finally, the chase scene. The state police, chrome robots in hot pursuit. The 2 heroes try to find their way out of a world nobody wants. THX manages to steal a jet car, but his friend can't cope with the simple job of driving. Chance Chances are they'll be making more science fiction movies in the near future. The filmmakers, like the astronauts, know the sky is no longer the limit. Dick Shoemaker, ABC News.
We'll be back with more news in a moment.
We are putting the 3 leading sleep tablets to a dramatic laboratory test. One of them is Nitol. Of course, it's safe taken as directed. You can see which one it is because it dissolves twice as fast as the others. That's right, it's this one, Nitol. Nitol. It helps you get to sleep fast, and it has the Good Housekeeping seal. And now, Nitol has a fast-acting formula in a modern capsule. Introducing the Nitol Sleep Capsule.
You're late. You too.
Mrs. Porter, did you get your dentures Polident clean this morning?
The way I'm rushed?
Now there's a new fast-working Polident tablet, new Polident Green.
Polident Green? Why green?
The green shows speed as powerful green cleaning bubbles clean dentures fast.
Fast? How fast?
In just minutes, the green is gone. That means stain and odor are gone. Now, the best way to clean dentures is the fast way, too. New Polident Green.
In other news today, Representative Robert Taft Jr. announced that he plans to run for the Senate from Ohio. He is the son of the man who became known as Mr. Republican. The congressman will face Governor Rhodes in the Ohio Republican primary. Prime Minister Sato headed back to Japan this evening, taking with him just what he came for: an agreement from the United States to return control of Okinawa to Japan by the end of 1972. The U.S. will retain military bases there, but all nuclear weapons will be removed. The decision was announced after 3 days of meetings between the Prime Minister and President Nixon. The President told a meeting of about 3,000 business leaders here this afternoon that the government has no intention of easing its fight on inflation until prices start to go down. He came armed with the latest figures on the cost of living, up another 0.4% last month. The major factors in the newest increase are higher prices for cars and houses. In Santa Barbara, California, residents came up today with an unusual means of protest. They held a fish-in. ABC's John Davenport has details.
The protest is taking the form of a fish-in. It was of David and Goliath dimensions. Goliath was a 26-story Sun oil well platform resting on a seagoing barge. Its opponents were a small sailing vessel, a rowboat, and the mini-fleet's air arm, a helicopter. The fish-in was conducted by a group known as GOO, for Get Oil Out. GOO is afraid of undersea oil leaks, the kind that last February blackened coastal beaches and strangled hundreds of wildlife. Attempts by GOO to sway the oil workers have failed. One worker hurled a paintbrush at a passing GOO crew. GOO has appealed to Supreme Court Justice Douglas, an ardent conservationist, for a halt to the drilling. Meanwhile, operations continued. A Sun Oil spokesman explained his firm's side of the dispute.
I think that the American people, whose nation runs on energy, whose mobility in the automobile, whose homes are heated by petroleum fuels, who depend on oil for many, many things which they use in their everyday lives, also have a stake in the Santa Barbara Channel.
Meanwhile, no catches have been reported by the anglers. Later today, the floating protesters won a victory of sorts when the huge platform slipped from the barge and fell upside down into the Pacific. John Davenport, ABC News, Santa Barbara.
We'll be back in a moment.
ABC Sports brings you the action, pageantry, and thrills of collegiate football. The top teams from all sections of the country in the season's key games. NCAA football every week on ABC.
In his speech last night, Vice President Agnew said TV commentators will now be the subject of comment and criticism themselves. So it goes without saying, will the Vice President? Frank has such a comment. Frank?
Although Vice President Agnew has now broadened his discussion to include certain newspapers, I want to talk tonight only about his first speech, the one devoted exclusively to network television news. I am the anchorman the Vice President twice quoted, but did not identify. He quoted me correctly, but I think in a misleading way. However, that is not important. The Vice President proclaims his opposition to any form of censorship, and I agree with him. But I think he disagrees with himself, for what he wants is not independent analysis, but collaboration. Mr. Agnew confuses commentators with cheerleaders. Do you? I think not. And that raises a point that is important. Ask yourself whether the nation is ever well served when honest men withhold honest opinions for fear of an angry reaction from the government or the public. Are we to say not what we believe, but what we think most people want to hear? Again, Mr. Agnew seems to confuse commentators, perhaps with certain politicians. Do you? I think not. And that raises perhaps the most important point of all. There is something much worse than a public official attempting to frighten a broadcaster. And that is a broadcaster who allows himself to be frightened. So put us to the test. Watch us. If on your television set you see timidity disguised as objectivity, fear masquerading as fairness, then we will deserve Mr. Agnew's contempt, and more important, yours. Finally, I would like to suggest a word of encouragement to the Vice President. Let him be of good cheer. The people are wise. They are not as easily misled as he seems to fear. In fact, I dare to suggest that they do not need him to protect them from us. The position of a commentator's eyebrow will not determine their position on really important matters. I have never been under the illusion that I could fool anybody. And despite the Vice President's bombardment of the moment, I remain convinced that in the long run, neither can he. Howard?
Thank you, Frank. That's tonight's news and comment. I'm Howard K. Smith. Good night.